Hey everyone, this is Lisa from Life in Layouts and welcome back to day number 6 of March Madness. Today's page map sketch comes from July of 2022. I pulled out my Galaxy Defender kit from Kellybell Designs to document some photos of meeting Buzz Lightyear. As you can see, I printed out 2 of the pattern papers on a full 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and then I used another sheet of paper to cut out some squares for the rest of the pattern paper. I'm going to use the silhouette print and cut feature to cut out all of my embellishments. I pulled out this really pretty blue pattern paper to use as my background. Like the sketch calls for, I'm going to add this pattern paper in the center of the layout, but then my embellishments were ready from the silhouette, so I decided to pull those off. My mat is getting less and less sticky every single day, so super excited about that. Was able to get these off pretty easily. I do like to ink all of the edges of my print and cut features if they do not have the white border. This just helps with any of the pieces that may have had a little offcut. The Silhouette Studio does an amazing job with cutting these images out, but at the end of the day, it is just a machine and sometimes it misses just a little bit. I did also decide to ink up the edge of this particular card that I'm going to add over on the left-hand side of the layout. That card there says, "Excuse me, I believe the word you are searching for is Space Ranger." And then it quotes Buzz Lightyear because he said that in the movie. I do plan to do a tutorial next month once March Madness is over about sizing all of these elements, and I'm hoping that will help you guys out with the different pieces that you need to cut out. I forgot to zoom back out, but I think that you're able to see pretty much everything. I did have the striped paper that I had printed out from the previous layout, and you can see the size difference there between the two of them. I thought about using the smaller one, but I did decide to go ahead and use the larger one. First, I needed to figure out where I was going to cut the spaceship paper so that I could have those measurements right, and then I could decide on how large I wanted that striped paper to be. I did have to cut the spaceship paper in half because I wanted it to span the entire layout. So to make it look like a 12-inch piece of paper, I just cut it in half, and then I'm going to cover up that seam there with one of my photos. I did decide to ink the edges of that paper as well with that purple ink. Once I got the left-hand side down, then I went ahead and added the right-hand side as well. And then I'm going to lay down my photos and test them out, making sure that they are going to work in that area. I then am going to cut out the striped paper, and I knew that I wanted a smaller piece for the left-hand side of the layout, so I did have to spend a little bit of time trying to figure out what size I wanted it. For the striped paper, just like the sketch calls for, it does not need to be a full 12 inches. So I'm going to add that over to the far left. I'm going to tuck it underneath the spaceship paper so that it does look like that paper is laying on top of it. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing for the right-hand side of the layout. Once I got the paper down, then I went ahead and laid the 2 photos that are going to be on the left-hand side of the layout. I knew that the photos were going to go all the way to the edge, so that was going to cover up a majority of that seam. Then the card is going to cover up the rest of it. I did decide to put that card up on fun foam because I wanted it to overlap a little bit on the photo, and I felt like giving it that dimension would help. I did cut out the Buzz Lightyear from the word art, and that is going to be my title. I'm going to overlap it a little bit on the card. The top of the card, it is really hard to see because it is white just like the card is, but there is like a planet on the top. And then when I lay the Buzz Lightyear word art on top of it, I like how it really nestles right in with the saying that Buzz Lightyear says. I also decided to put that up on fun foam so that those 2 are the same height, and I did not put any fun foam on the word Lightyear because I knew it was going to overlap the card. For the right hand side of the photo, I did decide to trim down the 2 photos of my friend Jennifer and myself hugging Buzz Lightyear, just so that I had a little bit of extra space over on the right hand side, because I did want to have a couple of embellishments over there, and my embellishments were kind of large, like this larger spaceship. Before I put the embellishments down, I felt like the background paper was kind of getting lost with that stripe paper right next to the spaceship paper. So I had this green paper that I had from the previous layout that I made. So I decided to add that down between the spaceship paper and the stripe paper. And I really like the green, but I felt like there still wasn't enough of a contrast between the two. So I had this purple scrap of paper from the previous layout. I thought, you know what, that's what I need. I need a solid color, almost a place for my eyes to rest. And once I got that down, I knew that it was perfect. I only cut it out at like 1/8 of an inch, so it's super small, but it's just enough to give it that contrast. Then I'm going to start working on that cluster on the far right. I have definitely learned so much since I started working with the digital collections. I remember the first time I cut out this spaceship, I did not cut out the bottom part where the red is because they were just so small. But because I added that white border around the edge of it and I was able to weld it together, now all of it is one piece as opposed to having 7 of those smaller red pieces at the bottom. Adding that white border really helped bring it together and make it a solid piece. I did pull out my bottle caps. I got these from Hobby Lobby, but they no longer sell them, but I do have them linked below in my Amazon storefront. The reason I printed out this paper in a smaller scale was I was going to add it up to the top, a little banner, just like the sketch calls for, and I wanted a bunch of different pattern papers. And that's one of the things that I love about this digital collection is I only have to print out what I need. So I only had to use 1 sheet of paper and I was able to get multiple patterns on that sheet of paper. I decided to ink up all of the edges to tie it into the other paper since I inked up that edge as well. I did use a small little banner punch that I had. That banner punch is a 1-inch punch. I'm not exactly sure where I got it. I think I've had it forever. I might have even picked it up at like a scrapbook yard sale or something like that. I did decide to put those little banner pieces up on fun foam. I thought it would be a little bit easier to try to figure out the placement of them. If they were on the fun foam, I could move them around a little bit. And then also when I add the jute twine to it a little bit later, I'm going to tuck it underneath, and that makes it super easy to get it down. At this point, I decided to pull out my dies to see what dies I can use with either the paper that I cut out or the solid cardstock that I was using. I found this star die. It's a cluster of stars. I really thought that that would be perfect for a layout about Space Ranger. And I also found this circle die. I've tried to use this die a couple of times and I never could make it work. But I was actually able to cut that circle die in half and use it in 2 separate places. And it really does tie the embellishment pieces together by almost connecting them. I also pulled out this shooting star die and I cut it out in the striped paper, but it unfortunately does not make it to the layout. And I also cut out the circle die in the stripe as well, but I do decide to end up using the green. I first tried to use the stars over on the far right, but I wasn't liking the way that that looked. When I moved it over to the left behind the Buzz Lightyear word art, I really liked that. I did have to cut it down because I didn't need such a large piece, and I tucked it behind the planet, and I think that it fits really nicely over there. I then went back to the little banner pieces and decided to go ahead and adhere those down. And then this is where I'm going to go ahead and cut that little circle piece in half. I'm going to tuck it on the right hand side of the spaceship. I thought about tucking the other piece down below, but wasn't liking the way that looked. I also cut out this little notebook die and I tucked that down at the bottom. I thought at first I was going to add my journaling to it, but then I decided to put a bunch of embellishments on it. I did pull out my color binders in green and purple, trying to find a couple of pieces to add to this layout as well. I found a little purple tag and I'm going to go ahead and add the date with my roller date stamp to that tag and add it right on top of that notebook paper. I then am going to add one of my bottle caps, and the flare that's inside of that says, "This isn't flying, it's falling with style." I then pulled out this tag from the main kit that says "Batteries not included," and I added that up on fun foam and decided to add it right underneath the date. Then I pulled some of the stars from the main kit as well and added a red star underneath the batteries not included. I then decided to start working on the spaceship cluster again. I pulled out one of the flares that says Space Ranger Friends and added it into a white bottle cap and added it over next to the spaceship. Over on the left-hand side, I added the other half of that circle that I cut out, and then I'm going to add a purple star from the main kit, and I did decide to put that one up on Fun Foam. At the top of the planet, I pulled out another flare and I put it in a purple bottle cap. That one says, "Life's only worth living if you're being loved by a kid." And then I'm going to take the stars from the element kits and add them to the clusters. Over on the far right, I'm going to add a green one and a red one. And I do decide to add both of those down flat. I really tried to make that shooting star work, but it just didn't make it to the layout, unfortunately. Over on the left-hand side, I added a green star down, but then decided that I needed to pop that up. So I took it up and put a red star down, then added some foam adhesive behind the green star and added it actually to the green circle. I then pulled out my tiny stars and my tiny hearts. These are from Fawn, and I will link them below. This is a perfect way to add a ton of different colors from your digital collections onto your layout without adding a lot of different pieces. So I used those small squares that I had cut out for the banner, and I'm going to cut out a bunch of different stars in all the different colored pattern papers. I am going to stack the stars too high with the white cardstock, and then I'm going to add the pattern paper on top of it. This gives me some dimension with these stars without having to add some foam adhesive to the back of them. I cut out all the pattern paper, but I actually only ended up using the red stripe as well as the colorful stripe and then the blue polka dot and the green paper. I felt like the other pieces were a little much. And I'm going to add stars all over the layout in all of the different clusters. I pulled out my liquid adhesive as well as my reverse tweezers. Those things are a godsend when you're trying to put these things down because they're so tiny, so it holds on to them for you until you put it down and then you release the tweezers. After I got all the stars down, then I'm going to add the jute twine to the top. This is off camera, but what I'm doing is adding some liquid adhesive to the inside edges of the banner pieces, really on the Fun Foam itself, and then I'm going to use my tweezers to tuck that jute twine in, making sure that it makes contact with the foam adhesive that's on the back of it so that it will stick to it. Then I pulled out my glue dots and added those down so that the end of the banner string would sit in the same place. I'm going to do that for both the left and right hand side of that piece, and then I'll cut off the jute twine. I did decide to pick up these pops of color from scrapbook.com. I'll link them below. I only got the white one because I wanted to try it out, and I'm really liking these. They're kind of like stickles, but they are not sticky. They don't stick to things after they dry, and I feel like they really hold their shape. I did slow the video down here so that you can see it, and I really like that this color takes on the color of the background. So even though it was a clear color, because I put it on the blue paper, it almost looks blue. The sparkles really pick up the blue cardstock. All right, and then that is it for this video. Here is my final layout as well as some close-ups. I did do my journaling offline, and it says, Jennifer and I met Buzz Lightyear, and he was just as charismatic in person as he was on the big screen. Buzz told us about his latest mission to protect the galaxy and even showed us how to fall with style. All right, if you enjoyed this video, if you wouldn't mind giving me a thumbs up, I would really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already and you want to see more double page layout inspiration, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thanks everyone for watching, and I hope that you have a scrappy day.